Welcome everyone to the Release Automation Community Webcast on creating a Release Automation Continuous Delivery Edition plugin. Today we have Walter Guerrero presenting on this topic, and he's going to show you some slides as well as show you a little bit of a demo on this. If you have any questions, please be sure to enter them in the Q&A panel, and we will get to them as quickly as possible. If there are any questions at the end of the session that you'd like to ask verbally, we'll pause at the end of the presentation to take questions. Walter, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Melanie. And thank you, everyone, for attending this presentation with other exciting new features that are becoming available with Release Automation Continuous Delivery Edition. And what we're going to be covering here is how to create your own plugin. So this is the agenda for today. What is the RA CDE plugin framework? What are online microservices that you will be able to use to develop this required plugins? Also, what is the offline services? What does it mean overall? So we'll be discussing that. Then the manifest file, the implementation, what is it that you have to do to implement this? And finally, we're going to be talking about best practices. And that is not here on the list, but we're going to go through a small demo showing you how this gets built and how is it you will go about using it and how you integrate it with Release Automation Continuous Delivery Edition, aka CDE. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So one of the main challenges, when it comes to building a continuous delivery tool chain is that you have the application delivery is extremely complex. You have hundreds, thousands of machines provisioning, you have middleware, you have applications with hundreds of artifacts that you need to bring across from multiple repositories. And one of the biggest thing here is that you may also have a need for you to develop your own plugins in addition to the ones that are shipped with the product, because you may need to be able to do some very specific actions or tasks as needed, or you may need to be import into CDE a specific set of application data that you're looking for to be importing overall. But most of the time what's going to happen is that you are going to be working in trying to execute a task, automate the execution of a given task. So, there are a lot more pressure points happening overall in the application content, the complexity of this content and how is it that all this stuff is running. And there is a multiplier effect on what's happening at the pipeline level. But again, as you have expansion of tools and more dependencies out there, when you have open source, homegrown, third-party commercial tools, different tools, that are being used by different teams. Because of that, there is also a huge need for you to be able to have your own development works in regards to creating a plugin that you may need right away, or an idea to us in the communities for an additional plugin, and you can see how the business, the business need for it. But if you really need one, what I'm going to show you is how you can actually develop a plugin to test your theory fairly quickly by using online hosted services, or if you really want to go through the traditional method of creating a warfile, a web app, then we're going to cover some of that stuff as well, so you can see what exactly is what takes place to make this happening. So what is a CDE plugin framework? What exactly is it? As you can see here in the slide is that, for you to having effectiveness in how CDE works, it depends a lot in his ability to interact with the remote components in your continuous delivery pipeline. That's the whole key here, is how does it interact? How is this stuff supposed to be working? And what is it doing at certain areas? And why is it happening in that different spots? So here we can tell you what exactly is being supported overall by the product, and we're supporting configuration of endpoints, the creation of the automated task, the importing of the contents like I was mentioning. Those are the kinds of things that you can do to make this the full-blown integration based on the tools that you have available at hand within your environments. So here we go. The plugin framework architecture. The architecture of this particular plugin is intended, as it says here, to provide you with a quick and flexible development where you can actually create integrations with remote components and add them to your pipeline. One of the beauties of this, the plugin framework, is that it doesn't require any specific programming language or delivery model in how you can actually deliver this. Hence, this is the reason why I was saying that you can create what's called an offline Java project, that you install, similar to the current way that you install the package plugins. But that particular warfile doesn't even have to be Java. It can be based on JavaScript or on JSPs, or it can also be based on PHP, depending on what you're trying to do. And the same applies to an online service that can be used that allows you to actually connect the product and interact with it, and giving you the capability of creating the necessary microservices, so you have that ability to develop this. And what we're going to do here in this presentation is that we're going to show you how this is done via Hook.io. Hook.io is an online microservices provider where you would develop your own microservices out there. And initially, Hook.io was based on JavaScript, but they are expanding the number of supported languages that are available to you and what you can do with the available facilities. I'll show you some other stuff so you can get an idea what exactly is it that you need to do to make that work. So here we go. What does it take to develop a plugin? This is always a question. This was my first question when I started working with this, because I was trying to figure this out. What is it that I need to do to develop a plugin? What am I looking at? Well, as you can see here in the bullet points that I presented here to you, the plugin must be able to accept a HTTP, to be able to accept RESTful calls, ideally, because that's the best way of handling this. And it needs to be able to accept a POST request and or a GET request. All the available type of HTTP services can also be used here as well. But the big thing is that we need and expect a return, a response in return. It could be a 200 value, that means the response completed successfully, or it could be a JSON response file, snippet of code that then we can strip out and actually process it and see what's going on in there and process that and present that in the task. If you are creating very sophisticated plugins, I would strongly recommend that you create an offline project, a web-based project instead, because that will give you better control at how everything is handled properly. Another thing that you will need for this to work properly and to make it all really work is that you need to have a manifest.json file. This is the whole key to this whole enterprise, because this particular manifest file details what are the plugin capabilities. It details who made the plugin, what are the available tasks, what are the available properties that you can use for this given plugin, and how everything works overall. And after you finish the plugin development and you're satisfied that the plugin is working and doing what it's supposed to do, you will need to follow the standard procedures on how to add a plugin to the RA CDE. And the standard procedure is basically described in the documentation section of RA CDE that is available online, which means you just go to administration, plugins, you add a plugin. We'll step through it so you can see what exactly I'm talking about, so you can get better understanding of what's really going on here, and it will make it easy for you to understand. So let's talk about what exactly is in the manifest.json file. As I've been saying, this is the key to this whole thing. When I started looking at this, I was looking at this area and trying to figure out, how is it that this is integrated? And the more I study this and how the actual framework works, what it does is hides the plugin capabilities. It tells you what the plugin is capable of doing. It also tells you, what capabilities are configurable, if there is any. The format you follow is basically you have the basic plugin information, such as the name and the version. You include the endpoint templates, again, that describes the name and the required parameters. And then you include information for each of the services that the plugin provides. For example, most of you that are doing this are going to be doing mostly tasks, and maybe some content import. That's what you're going to be doing most of the time, is actually performing those areas. But at the same time, there is an application model import facilities that you can use. So you have those areas that you can actually exploit. But I can see most of everyone out there doing the creation of tasks, because that's what everyone wants, just additional automated tasks. And one of the biggest things is that the manifest file needs to be placed at the top level of the project. This is very important and very key, because whenever the WAR file is expanded, shall we say, if it's an offline project, the first thing that it's looking for is this manifest file. That's what CDE is looking for. Once it finds it and starts the process of telling you, okay, this is where it's at, this is the task, this is the capabilities that are presently available, and moves on from there. It allows you to interact with it fairly quickly. Here in this example, this is what I want to actually talk about in more detail. Where here, we're actually showing you, where you have the name of the plugin. In our example here is basically Bamboo Plugin 1.0. The vendor, what is the unique ID? It is important that you maintain a unique ID so it avoids confusion between the multiple plugins, or if you have multiple plugins out there. It also includes, the description of the plugin. In this example, it's telling you it's powered by Hook.io. It also includes the icon URL, basically where does the icon reside and where does it live, and how do I get to it. And it gives you a version number. And one of the biggest things here that this particular plugin is showing me here that I have marked in red is the relative URL. I have it marked as true. This is very key and important, because as I get down into all areas, I'll explain what that means overall and why exactly is this, true. And everything else after that, we have the endpoint template, where I was describing exactly what is the name of the template, what is the name of the plugin at the endpoint level. And here's just telling you that is the description of it, why is it going to be listed, the parameters, what it's expecting. Is expecting the username, is a string, is it optional, is it set up to false, and the password is a password field, is set up to false, meaning that this particular two fields are a requirement. We cannot get around that issue, so we have to put those in there. But the relative URL, if you are going to be doing what is called a relative, if you're going to be building a URL relative based off different sections of it being passed on to the plugin, it is important. This is very true for online hosted type of plugins, where you set this value to true, and what it does is that it then goes out there and it allows you to build the whole string correctly. Prior to that, I was running into a lot of troubles here, because in the offline, this is basically set to false, meaning that the system knows they're going to be processing, because it builds it before it passes it on. It's not building it on the fly like it does in an online hosted type of a microservice application, which is basically what I'm showing here. So by you setting this to false in an offline, or if you have it hard-coded, as another example I will show you later, then the value being set to false makes sense. But in this particular scenario, we need to have the value set to true for it to basically work correctly. And here's basically the reason why I'm doing that, because when it gets down to this right here, it's going to be building part of this right here at this area, which says URL. It goes out there and actually replaces some of this data and builds it properly. Here it's just pointing to the Hook.io, exactly where this particular logic lives in the online hosted area. So that's basically the whole description of what a manifest file looks like and how should you go about creating this. I would strongly recommend that you build this in a JSON editor, because if you miss a series of brackets or curly braces, it may make it difficult for you to determine exactly what is it that you missed the particular curly brace and how is it that this is defined. Now let's talk about the online hosted plugins. What CDE allows you, provides you with, is that it gives you a very flexible environment where you can create what is called a hosted plugin online and you can use GitHub and Hook.io for these purposes. You don't really have to use this. You can use other services. You can use the Microsoft services if you wish to actually give you the ability to see, the microservice, how it's set up and configured and host it from there. In our example, we're using Hook.io to host the microservice that you will be calling, and GitHub is host the manifest, JSON, and a copy of the JavaScript, where there's actually the logic behind that is actually executing all of this microservices call. This is very good, especially if you're trying to figure out if this is the correct type of plugin with given passes that you're trying to execute here and make it work properly. But there is a little catch here, like in anything else, that under GitHub, for you to be able to see the JSON manifest file, the manifest.json file, and the actual JavaScript code, you need to be able to see exactly how it's interacting. You need to place these files under the gh-pages. So in other words, you need to build the built-in GitHub pages, so it allows you to actually see what's coming in there. That would allow you to access directly to the browser. This is very key, because if you don't define it this way, you'll never be able to read the manifest file, and you'll never be able to execute the actual action that is actually occurring, in the task that you need to do. Okay, an offline hosted plugin. This is your typical web Java project under Eclipse or IntelliJ. You are basically using traditional Java services and facilities. It is recommended that you use Eclipse EE Enterprise Edition to actually complete this area. And you will be creating what is called a dynamic web project to actually build it properly. And because, again, I'll show you what I'm talking about so you can get a better idea and understanding and how this code gets created and it gets used around the different areas. And you will actually generate a traditional warfile, that will be made part of the Tomcat station. This is the stuff that it gives you, that offline host that the plugins gives you. What are the advantages of doing this? The advantages here is that you have better control and more, you can actually get more when it comes to handling the data, or if you're trying to handle complex data sets, or if you like to include additional tasks or more tasks that are actually going to be processing the JSON better than what you actually process it to JavaScript, even though it's the same thing. But also you can include, if you're going to be doing some other things, then you need to interact with .NET applications or C++-based applications. And you can actually include those in this particular JavaScript by making inline calls to those other type of platforms as needed. And that's the power that the offline hosted application plugin brings to the table. Plus, you control who's using this. So within your enterprise, you can say, okay, this is where this is going to reside, this is what we're doing with it, and this is how it's going to be used. So it gives you a lot more control overall on what's happening here. And that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind as how it's being used. So let's talk about the best practices overall in what is it that you need to do to create a manifest. The manifest has to be portable. So what I mean by this is that you want to keep the contents of this file very agnostic to the location of the server container. What I mean by that is that instead of you hard-coding the location of the server container, you just keep it agnostic and have the manifest file actually at runtime determine exactly where the server container is located at. That's one of those practices that is important to keep. Sensitive information, for example, as passwords or endpoint parameters. You may want to store that, in an area that is very secure. Passwords, if you store it as a password, then you need to be able to add the logic to the rest of the plugin information to be able to decrypt the password and use it where it needs to be used, especially if you build in RESTful API calls, and you need to be able to build a base 64 encoding for for basic authentication, or if you need to do something in regards to OA authority type of authentication. So it's important that you process this stuff correctly. The same goes for the endpoint parameters. You need to be able to store those and save those and keep it, network connectivity details as endpoint parameters, because that information is stored and it's not, it cannot be broken into as easily. Another area that you need to start be very concerned about is the packaging. You need to ensure that the manifest is part of the plugin package. It is not recommended that you store this manifest separately from the plugin. This is key, because remember what I said before, that you have to make it agnostic in regards to the manifest file. This is where this is important, because if you don't do that, what happens here at this point is that then you have to kind of know where the stuff is, and it's hard, and you actually have to kind of keep track of all the different areas where this manifest file is, and it will cause a lot of issues, a lot of problems. So best practices is that you ensure that the manifest.json file resides at the root of the plugin package. It's so important that it resides there, and it remains there. For the online version, that's slightly different. That one, again, also is at the root, and because you're using microservices, the JavaScript file that is associated with it there in the GitHub is just there for reference purposes. So that's basically what you need to start worrying about and checking out how this is happening. Naming and versioning, this is just a typical software development best practices. Don't create multiple plugins with the same name. It has happened. Ensure that each has a unique ID. Remember what I was emphasizing when I was showing you a typical JSON implementation that you saw there. Keep it separate. Also make sure the unique ID at the plugin is a string. That way that includes the plugin name and the vendor. Again, is important. And you saw that when I was showing you there that we have it set up in the same method, where you have this com.ca that the plugins in the actual name that we're trying to accomplish. Also, after you publish the plugin to the community, which it could be your internal community or the external community, don't change the name. Just make sure that the name remains the same no matter what, because it's important that that remains there so you can see, what's going on, and everyone has continuity in regards to that. Always update the version of the plugin every time you modify and release the plugin. This is also important. That way, people can see that the versioning is changing, and they can make different changes as they're actually working and performing the different things that they need to do to verify that they have the correct version, and maybe use the features as they're being included. Why is this important? Well, by you creating your own plugin, it allows you to integrate your tools with RA CDE. This is important because it allows you to design a plugin to do exactly the type of tasks that you're trying to complete. This is important because it also allows you to complete the continuous delivery of your releases overall by using automating them through RA CDE. That's the beauty of this whole thing, that it allows you to extend it. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to share my desktop. Okay, hold on. Give me a second. I need to make sure that I have the right windows opened so we can do this. All right, so we're going to share my desktop. Okay, can somebody tell me if you can see my desktop?
I can see it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so what I've done here is that I'm going to go to the administration line, and I'm going to check out the plugins. Notice that there are two plugins in here. One of them is pointing to Bamboo, and one of them is pointing to a GitHub test. We're going to use the GitHub test because it's very simple to see, easy to explain. So here, what I did is that I went and grabbed the JSON. Remember I was saying that this particular JSON basically resides in the gh-pages branch in this particular GitHub user. That's where this is resides, also resides in the master to keep track of what's going on. So what I did is I grabbed this information and I placed it here. And what this does, it allows you to create a plugin and brings it online. And the same thing happened over here because I created another plugin that is doing different things. It's connected to a different user in GitHub. Remember, I'm using the public version of GitHub. This could be your own enterprise version of your GitHub if you choose to use that. That way it will save you more of a hassle trying to use it externally. Notice that the version number is the way I have it defined. It's more like a standard version that's in release automation. And this is more like a standard basic definition of it. So now we're going to go to endpoints. Here at the endpoints, you're going to see two plugins. You're going to see the Bamboo endpoint. You're going to see the GitHub repo endpoint. So what we're going to do, we're going to drop down into this guy. And here, basically, I'm telling you what is it called, and it allows you to work, how it's going to be connecting, and blah, 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 blah. And it tells you that this is named Online Plugin Demo. This is an OnlineHosted Plugin Demo. This is basically the type of plugin that it is. It is what I created, which is a GitHub repository. And then our PM username and robot store, and the password, that it passes on. Given that, starting with version 6.1, the concept of a testing the connection was introduced for the online hosts plugins. I haven't quite figured out yet how to do a test connection. But in offline, that's available. You can actually test your connection at this level here. So it allows you to see if your connection to it is working correctly. So, and the same thing can be done for the Bamboo area as well, where you enter, the Bamboo URL, the user, and the name and the password, and get ready to run. After we have done all of that, we switch over to the release. We already have a release that I've been running. And basically what I did here is I come here and I go to the edit task. And at the edit task, I basically select the update GitHub issue state. Those are my available tasks. And based on the endpoint, which is online plugin demo, I pass the issue and I pass the type of issue that is going to be closed. But if I really want to see what's happening here, you can see here, not only I have the manual one, I have the other one that I created. That is basically the Bamboo one in Bamboo Run Build. It allows you to run a build from Bamboo. And we also have the update GitHub issue state. We have the additional ones that are shipped with the product now, which is the Jira ones, the Rally update for the Rally platform. And we also have the release automation for run deployment, and we have the generic REST that is actually executing out there. So these are the values, as you can see here, that I have two drop-downs in addition to what the task is doing here. And I'll show you how this is defined in the manifest.json file, so you can get an understanding how all the stuff works together and how it is behaving properly. So anyways, we have it ready. We're going to save it. So what we're going to do, we're going to execute this. So it goes out there, it starts executing it, and it completes it, and it's telling you, it's passing the value back by saying that the issue has been closed. So at this point, the issue is completely closed, and it's ready to go. So what's really happening behind the scenes? What is happening behind the scenes is that this is everything that is occurring. This is the GitHub Demo plugin. And here we are at the master branch. And from the master branch, I can also drop into the GH pages, which is basically what's calling the plugin. And as you can see here, you will see the GitHub JSON plugin and also the JavaScript, if you so chooses. But in this case, we just have the JSON plugin because this is interacting with the JavaScript as it resides in the hook.io, the microservice. Here, basically, this is just here for controlling purposes. So if we look at that JSON GitHub, this is basically what's going on. And here, as you can see, remember what I was talking about, that you will have the GitHub test 1.0. It tells you the vendor. In this case, it has 0, but it could also be CA Technologies. I'll show you another one that shows you all that information. But the beauty of this is, remember, the relative path is set up to false, and you'll see why this is set up to false once we get down into the JavaScript. These are the parameters that we're passing. Remember, the get user and repository name. This is display name is authorization. The type is password. And you're going to have to figure out how to, in the JavaScript, you actually write the logic to extract the password, especially if you need to build a base 64 encoding for the basic authentication. So here are the services that are provided. This is what it was saying that it's going to be doing an update GitHub issue state. So it's going to show you this, and here it gives you the unique ID, it gives you the description, what is this task that it's going to be doing here. And in this case, it's a task. And this is going to be passing the full-blown, hard-coded GitHub issues name, because he knows where this is at, he knows where this is going to go get it, and that's it. He goes gets it there. And here basically it's telling you the issue that we need to pass. This is one of the values that is going to be passed. And here at the bottom it says issue status. And remember what I was showing you, the possible values? Well, there they are. Here's basically where you hard code the possible values that are part of the drop down for that given box. So you can see how this is defined properly and how this works. Now that we have seen what the manifest file is, then we can go down into the hook.io. This is the actual hook that resides in the hook.io environment. And here it's telling you that it's a hook. It's telling you how the request is coming in, the type of parameters that are going to be used, and the type of authorization that is being passed here, which in this case is basically the authorization user agent, and it's passing the request, which is basically what I'm passing in here. It's a request, and the request is composed of the authorization, and that's what's being passed to the variable here in this area. That's basically your value there. And then you'll be receiving in the task properties is how the issue is being handled correctly. And here we go and do the GitHub update. As you can see here, this is basically taking the whole line, like I told you before, because this is hard coded. So it goes, grabs it, passes the user, the repository, and the user ID, and we're doing a request. But in our case, it's going to be doing a patch. So because we're just patching the given value. And this is more or less built like a JSON value where you pass the URL, the request body, which we already built in because we have a stringified the status state. That's basically what's happening here. And after doing that, we pass the header, the response, and if there is an error, we get the error back. And here's the content type that's going to set the header, and a type of error header is going to be an application JSON. And this is how we're going to be processing this. So here it says that it's finished if it completes successfully. And this is the task state as of what happened. And it gives you the progress, which is basically 100%. That's what this basic hook.io is doing over here in this JavaScript. Now let's look at another one where I basically have it set up. Hold on. No, I don't want that one. This is what I'm going to be using pretty soon. So what we're going to look here, we're going to look at the other one that I created, which is basically the JSON one. And here we are basically in the Bamboo section. This is another hook.io. But here I'm describing how this is going to be running. This is all Bamboo stuff. And it's telling you how it's going to be used. And here, basically, here's the entry where I was doing the RESTful API. In this scenario here, I'm basically saying that I'm going to be building this on top of what I'm actually getting at the endpoint level. And this is very important because I don't know exactly what the name is of the Bamboo server. So I need to be able to pass that value generically. So that's what this is allowing me to do. I'm only expecting the Bamboo plan key to actually be able to execute this. So this is what I'm expecting here, and I'm expecting that as a string. So given that that's what that does there, then we can go here and check out what this is looking hook.io. This is the microservice that you were just seeing there. And this is the same thing that can be stored in GitHub just to keep it running. So here's the code, as the code looks. And this is the module overall. And here you can see it's a hook, it's a request, it's running the parameters, it's passing the password, It's handling all that information, on a needed basis. And as it's coming through, it's getting the client key. Then it's building the server because I already obtained the public server, and I'm getting the RESTful IP address latest queue plus the key. I'm building the contents overall. One of the biggest things is that I'm also getting the console logs because I want to see what's going on in regards to this. And as you can see here, I'm encoding the user, and my authorization here is basically I have to have this advanced token is equal to no check. If I don't have this value here, it gives me a lot of problems when it comes to actually executing this value correctly. As we move on, as you can see that this is what's going on here in regards to the hook.io and the finishes, and it does a build and it does a process. That's what it will be doing here. Ideally, what I would like to do is I'd like to create another task that once you start the build, the other task basically will go out there and start checking the status of the build to see when the build is going to be done. They start giving you a percentage, progress percentage of that as a what exactly is that, this build, but I envision this as a separate task. That's, in essence, how you will build an online hosted CDE plugin, where you have a manifest file and you have a microservice that is JavaScript-based in hook.io. But now, here comes the other question. Okay, fine. You showed me that stuff. That's okay. But what about an offline system? What is it that I have to do to make this work as an offline system? Meaning building a war file, a complete, full-on war file that I'll be distributing to my system overall. Here in this example, I'm showing you basically what the code is and what it actually is doing. And here we have the manifest JSON for a sample application that, simple source here. And it has the same type of information. It tells you, that it's a sample. That's the name of it. It gives you the unique ID, sample technologies. We can change that and come up with some standards based on what your facility is using for the standards. Version number, we define the endpoint. What is the unique ID for the endpoints, which is the URL. Is it optional? What is any value? The username, the password, standard stuff. And here are the services that we're going to be accomplishing. In this case, it's going to be called task 1. And this is what task 1 is going to be doing based on the different parameters. And here at the bottom is what we're doing in regards to, for the second parameter. This is what we can do based on the possible value list that is recorded. We also have the import model as well. This is a little bit more extended overall. Then we also have a connectivity test that actually allows you to see how is the connectivity working. This is the special case that I was talking about. And so you can see, okay, connectivity, all right, we'll do connectivity test. Based off that, there are 2 other classes, one for the connectivity test and one for the sample task. When you look at the sample task, basically, we got to go here. We'll go to the main class, which contains the application. And this one right here, the main class, basically will contain a series of methods that we're going to be calling, which is the execute, the get application, the get list of external, and the get list of environments by application. This will be something good that probably we should be implementing. And what this does is it allows you, when you have those methods, these methods are in correlation to what was described in the manifest.json file. And this tells you, okay, this is what I'm going to go get based on the application external source. What is it? How am I going to handle this? The same applies for the external application. The same applies for the external environment. What am I going to be doing here? That's what this is all describing. What is the source for the application if I'm doing anything like that. But if you want to be talking about the tasks, I just go to the task here, and at the task level, this correlates to what you saw and how I defined the task, where you can see that there was one parameter, a second parameter, and a third parameter overall, and it gives you a better idea of what's happening. But at the same time, we can also see the different annotations, so what each of these guys are going to be doing in regards to the production of it. And we can actually process these values properly because I can see what I'm consuming based on the annotations and what I'm producing at the end and how I'm passing these values back and forth between the two. Remember what I said, this is a dynamic web application. And that's what you see in here, which says dynamic values, the next file is output. So it's telling you how everything is going to be processed. Here's the, it's doing a check at the endpoint, and what is the endpoint properties, because this is what we obtained based on how the manifest file was described. So it goes out there and describes it correctly, and then starts processing this by calling the HTTP client. So it goes and builds it and provides you with a different response and the different values and how all the stuff is working correctly. So that's in regards to the task. Now, for the connectivity test, it's just another class that is out there that allows you to process and do a check on the connectivity to see if the connection is correct by basically using doing a map, a collection map, where it's passing the end properties and say, okay, this is my properties, this is what I got to do, this is what I got to move on and process what I need to process. And that's basically how this whole thing is defined. And let me stop sharing. So let me go back to the session summary. In conclusion here, at the end here is that you can create your own RA CDE plugins based on your business requirements and how these business requirements affect the different tasks that you will need to automate with CDE. Another thing that you learned today is the fact that you can have the plugins hosted either online or offline, depending on your business needs and your security requirements or what you're trying to accomplish. You need to do something very quickly, or if you need to do something with more sophisticated, more robust, depending on what you're trying to see accomplish here and what's happening overall. Also, this allows you to integrate different tools, that might be available in your enterprise, and it allows you to bring these tools into your continuous delivery pipeline and help you in automating all your releases on an as-needed basis. This is very exciting technology. I can see how all of you will be able to use this and expand on it and make it work better and come up with new plugins that can easily be shared with other customers in the communities on an as-needed basis. Any questions, comments?
Just a reminder, if you want to ask a question in the Q&A panel, you can do that in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Or if you'd like to ask a verbal question, just click #6 on your telephone keypad to unmute your line. All right. Well, if there are no questions, I guess we'll be wrapping it up for today. I just put out a poll. If you could please vote on the quality of today's webcast topic. We'd like to get your feedback on this so we can help to plan future topics based on what you guys like. We have an upcoming webcast on the 29th on Release Automation version 6 architecture overview. So please RSVP to that if you're interested in joining that session. And thank you, Walter, so much. You did a great job. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.